Welcome back. In this lesson, I want us to complete our pagination. And by complete, I mean I want us to add metadata that will help the client better navigate the results that are returned. So at the end of this lesson, we want to be able to have a metadata similar to this, where the client knows the current page, the page size, the first page, the last page, and the total records. Now, when I say or when I mention total records, I don't mean the total records in the table. I mean what is the total number of records based on what filters the client has provided to us. So if after providing filters, we only end up with 4 records as the result set, then total records should be 4. Okay? And so we have to ensure that we get the correct value here. Likewise, to get the last page, we will need to do some calculation, because the last page will change based on what's the page size and what is the total number of records. After the metadata, then of course we have the regular school data. So that's the job for us right now. So the first thing I want to do is to actually create a new type that will contain the metadata. So let me go to filters.go, and let's proceed to create a new metadata type. All right, the metadata type contains metadata to help with pagination. All right, so when you type metadata, of course it's a struct, and the metadata will contain current page of type int, and let's add a struct tag, so JSON, and we will have it be current, well, not current, but yeah, current page, and we will have omit empty, and we're closing it. All right, so let's copy this, let's paste it. The next one is page size, and page size will of course have page size. Next, we will have first page, that's first page, followed by last page, and finally we will have total records. Okay, so that's our new type. And so one thing I want to do is to write a function that calculates the values for our metadata. And so I'm going to call that function calculate metadata. So the calculate metadata function computes the values for the metadata fields. Right? So let's just create that function. It's rather straightforward. All we need to provide is the total records, okay, of type int. We need to provide the page, also of type int, and we need to provide the page size, also of type int. And what this function calculate metadata will return is an actual metadata object containing the metadata for that particular client request. Now, if total records is 0, then we'll just return an empty metadata. Otherwise, we will return a metadata object that contains all the metadata about that particular request. So current page will simply be page, right? That's easy enough. The page size is page size, all right? Easy enough. The first page is page number 1. And the last page, well, that takes a bit of work. So to do that, I'm going to take total records and I'm going to divide that by page size. All right. Of course, I need to make these become float. Otherwise, it will be integer division. And so we'll get a whole number, which is not always what we want. So float 64 to ensure we keep the decimal value. So for example, if the page size is 5 and we have 11 records, then we know that the first 5 records will be on the first page. The second 5 records will be on the second page, and the one remaining record, record number 11, will be on the third page. All right, and so we are saying 11 divided by 5. That will give me 2 point something. All right, so we want to keep that point something. Why do we want to keep it? Well, if it's 2 point something, I want it to become 3. So we'll round up. So I'm going to say mat.ceiling. Of course, you need to ensure the mat package is imported. Okay, so mat package imported. All right, so it's complaining about integer. All right, that's easy enough. So I will just, for some reason, my float 64 disappeared. Let me put that back. Okay. And all I have to do, since the result returned by ceil is a float, but last page is an int, I will just convert to one int. Float 64. Okay, and finally, total records is simply total records. Right, and that's all we need to do. So I can close this and I can focus on our schools.go file, and in particular our get all method. So get all currently returns our list of schools based on the filters. But in addition to the list of schools, I also want it to return the metadata. So I'm going to put metadata. So it's going to return the list of schools. It's going to return a metadata, which is the data about the schools. All right. And so right here it's telling me, right, so I have a few things to fix. So let me fix this. If there are errors, I'm going to return metadata. All right. Right here, again, metadata. Right here, same thing. Let me just copy and paste. Okay. And for now, I will just say that we're going to return a variable named metadata, which contains the actual metadata. All right. Okay. So we have the next challenge, and the challenge is, how do we know what is the total number of records returned by this query? The easiest way to do that is by doing a window function. Okay, so if you recall, a window function allows us to get information about a particular subset of data. In our case, we are concerned about the particular data set, which is what is returned to us. So after executing this query, we want to know how many records there are in the record set, in the result set. And so to do that, by using a window function, I will simply say select count asterisk over. Okay, and let me put my comma here. Don't forget the comma, it's important. Okay, so this by itself is one column. So this is a column we're adding to our results. And this column, which will be in every row, will be how many rows did this query give me. So the DBMS will compute the rows. So let's say there are 100 rows. And what it will do, for each of those 100 rows, it will add the value, it will add this column, and for each row, it will add a value 100. So we will have, in this example, 100, ID 1, created that, so on and so forth. For the second row, it will add 100 as well. All right, and so that's the window function. Another example, if only 3 rows are returned in our result set, then the DBMS will add 3 to every row. All right, so it will add this column, and this column will contain 3 for every one of those 3 rows in our result set. So that's my window function. Alright, so once my window function has been created, then I need to actually deal with the total records. So currently I have nowhere to store the total records, okay, which is this one here. This is going to give me the total records, and I need to store it somewhere. So let's store it here. Let's give it a variable by the name of total records. Okay, so that means I need to create a variable up here. Okay, so here I'm gonna say total records, and let's just initialize it to 0. Okay. All right. Great. So we have a variable to store the total number of rows returned in the result set. And so let's do the last thing, which is to actually return a valid metadata object. And that's easy enough. So metadata, nope, not that one. Metadata will simply be a variable that I will get by calling the function calculate metadata. I will pass to it total records, which we have. I will pass to it page, which we have. So let's call that, where is my page? My page is in filters. Okay, so my page is in filters. So filters, that page. And I need page size, which is also in filters. So filters dot page size. And that's all I need. Once I have these three things, calculate metadata, will compute the metadata and return it to us. And so that's what we'll return: the school data, the metadata, and nil. Okay. So with that out of the way, we will need to go back to our handler and make that change to ensure that it still holds. So if we come up here, I'm probably sure I'm getting an error. Let's see. Oh, okay. Seems I went ahead and I did that. So let me remove that. Okay. All right. Yeah. So this is what we should have. And so to fix that, I'm just going to have metadata. And that takes care of it. Right? Just a simple change. Now, the next thing we need to do is to actually write out the result as a JSON, the metadata as JSON. And so if we come down here to write JSON, okay, you'll see that I have done that here. So previously we had this, right? Only the school data being shown. But now I want metadata to be shown. Metadata. All right, and so those are the only two changes we need to make in our handler. add the metadata to the envelope so that it is written out as a JSON object. And then when we call get all, ensure that we're calling it and accepting the right number of return values. So 3 things are returned. We need to make sure that all 3 are caught, okay, or saved. The data, the metadata, and the error. All right, that looks good. So let's fire up our terminal, our server, that is. Let's open a new terminal and let's test. Okay. Now I have metadata. Yes, I have metadata. 1 page, 20 per page, page 1, page 2. Okay, so last page would be page 2. And the total records, they're 22. Okay. All right, so if I ask for page 2, I get my 2 pages. Oh, so I get my 2 remaining records. All right. All right, so page 2 current, page size is 20, and so on. Okay. So if I ask for schools, and I say page is page 1, and page underscore size is 6, then I expect to have my metadata showing me the correct values. All right, so it checks out, it works. And so now as the client, when the client sees the metadata, they know exactly which page they're on. They know how many pages to go through, and they know how many records were returned in this particular request. So that is metadata. All right, so that's it. It's very useful to have metadata. And so what I want to do next, let me just do a quick commit. So git add and git commit, added metadata, added a metadata field to our response. All right, so git push origin main. All right, so we've come a long way, and so what we want to work on next is logging. So we're going to go back to logging and implement our logging facilities. So if you recall, in main, all we did was to create a logger, and that was it. All right, so we didn't do anything specific. We didn't write it to any file. All we did was to write it to std out to the console. All right, and if you recall, in the previous series, we did a bit more stuff when it came to logging. So in the next unit of this series, I want us to spend some time adding a bit more logging functionality. before we proceed to actually extending our API. So the next unit is more about logging, dealing with how do we capture problems that are going wrong with the server, and how do we ensure that those are properly logged. So I'll see you in that unit.